Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here today. My husband George and I started Seleni in 2011 because we envision a world where every woman, every mother, has access to exactly the care she needs as she navigates building and raising a family. Now, motherhood may be part of nature, but that does not mean it is easy. Women are expected to master their professional and personal lives while suffering from depression at 2 times the rate of men. They earn less, yet work more, while bearing the significant physical and emotional burdens of starting and raising a family. Mothers too often don't seek help for fear of being shunned. Thus, millions suffer in silence. So Seleni exists to provide support for women by providing care, online information, research funding, and professional trainings in reproductive and maternal emotional health worldwide. This could be the sole purpose of our mission, providing support to mothers and families. There's certainly enough work to do, even right here in New York City. It's necessary work, it's gratifying work, and it's an incredible privilege. But we realized we were missing something deeper. Seleni exists to shine light into the dark shadows, because at Seleni we're comfortable sitting in uncomfortable places. Places like grief and guilt, loneliness and sadness. We don't bring quick answers or pat solutions. We sit with those in suffering and bring support and help and hope. So important. But then what? Yes, we bring people back from the brink, but it's not over. Do they not still have to confront the same set of challenges that so many other women face? Many of the women here today have faced these challenges. Now, more than 19 million families with children in the United States have a mother who is the primary or co-breadwinner, and 70% of children live in households where all adults are employed. Sweden has 480 days of paid parental leave, of which 90 days are reserved for fathers. Canada has 17 weeks of paid maternity leave, after which both parents can share the remaining 37 weeks. How many days might you think American families have? 0. The result? Bad policies lead to bad outcomes. As paid leave decreases, infant mortality rates rise, and children are slower to reach developmental milestones. Poor paid leave policies are also linked to higher rates of depression in women. The children of moms with depression are 12 times more likely to suffer from a learning disability and are more prone to depression, anxiety, and violence themselves. But even if a mother knows about the harms of little to no leave, the decision is too often moot. Let me explain. At Seleni, we've extended our services free of charge to pregnant and parenting teenagers as young as 14. Monica is the perfect example of one of our young mums who is constantly struggling to succeed, despite the odds. Monica's 19 years old and has a 3-month-old daughter, Yuri, that she's raising all on her own. Apart from dealing with her feelings of shame that are constantly reinforced from the pediatrician to her very own mother, she worries about so many things, from child-rearing to managing tenuous relationships with her family and others, to fighting for public assistance for herself and her daughter. But her biggest worry of all is keeping her job so she can keep her life afloat. You see, Monica earns minimum wage, working part-time in a retail store, with a schedule that changes daily. She spends every moment worried about which reluctant family member or friend can watch Siri. And she panics about how she will drop off her baby across New York City, some days as early as 4 a.m. in order to get to her job by 6. So from childcare to work and back home again, she rides the subway for hours every day. And this has been happening since baby Yuri was 9 days old. Monica dreams of a high school diploma, a full-time job, and of course, a better future for Zuri. But right now, she can barely see a path to tomorrow, let alone their lifetime ahead. Monica and Zuri are not asking for much, but they deserve so much better. And so here we come to that uncomfortable place I told you about earlier, that Seleni often takes us to. A society that makes it virtually impossible to support a young child and work at the same time, or to choose not to have a child at all. That society is showing by its actions that it does not value parenthood. Here's the conflict. We imagine the ideal mother as one who is singularly devoted to her family, and the ideal worker singularly devoted to her employer. So when we expect singular dedication in both circumstances, women by definition are unable to do both. As long as we overlook this either-or proposition, as long as we pretend we have choices, we're stuck at the crossroads. And unless we recognize that it is both an ethical and an economic dilemma, we will remain stuck at that crossroad. We need to create a new reality for parents in the workplace, regardless of their financial status. We're soon about to hear from kindred spirits, those in public and private service, who are bringing these values to bear in the workplace. They are actively reimagining what it means to support families as they navigate their professional and personal worlds. It's time for a humane paradigm shift in America. So what works? What does not? What is both practical and doable? Time is so short, and resources are always stretched. We need as many good ideas as we can find, and thus our panel today. I, for one, am anxious to hear more about what they have to offer. But first, I'm so honored to introduce Dr. Anne-Marie Slaughter, President and CEO of New America. In her book, Unfinished Business, Dr. Slaughter has provided a powerful, thought-provoking vision for how to finish our long struggle for equality between women and men, work and family. Dr. Slaughter?
Good afternoon. So I'm actually a foreign policy and security person, and I will be going from this conversation to a conversation about foreign investment. So let me start by saying, as a policy person, as someone who runs an organization called New America, about renewing America in the digital age, one of the 2 or 3 most important policies we could adopt as a country is investing in the next generation. We must invest in the next generation to be militarily secure. And indeed, the Pentagon understands this. The Pentagon provides parental leave benefits, on-site daycare, and pays its early education teachers, which many people call daycare workers, the same as they pay their high school teachers, because they know we need that next generation to live up to their full potential. Economically, the competition globally just gets more intense. If we're going to be competitive in a 21st century global economy, we must invest in our next generation. And morally, if we are going to live up to the promise of an equal opportunity in our society, there is no more important thing we can do than investing in the first 5 to 8 years of every child's life. We now know that the right kind of engagement and education and care for children doesn't just ensure that that child arrives at school knowing a lot. It ensures that that child can learn for the rest of his or her life. We have all the data. We are shaping those children's brains. So children who do not get that kind of care literally arrive at school already disadvantaged, a disadvantage they will never make up just through school. So how do we invest in the next generation? Well, we actually start in pregnancy with nutrition and care. And then when that child is born, we absolutely have to have parental leave. Right? We also know that children who cannot attach with their caregivers have all sorts of disadvantages. And of course, for the parents, the mothers, the fathers, the two fathers, however you conceive of a family, it's equally essential to bond with your child, right? To lay down, again, what we now know are actually synapses that make that child feel secure for the rest of his or her life. So from a policy point of view, this is a no-brainer, right? Providing the leave that is necessary for parents to start their children off securely and then flowing into early education all the way through third grade. So that's from a policy point of view. This is totally doable, and we don't all just have to move to Sweden, although some of us in the back room were contemplating it after the last speech. During World War II, where we needed women in the workforce, we not only had on-site daycare, there were companies that provided a roast chicken for their workers to take home for dinner. Can you imagine? We needed that. We needed that economically. Well, we need that every bit as much today. Right? If you think of Japan, and Japan's realized that it will not grow economically without all of its women's talents being engaged in the workforce, the United States we're in better off than Japan, but right now, the lack of provisions and policies to allow parents to care for their children is driving women out of the workforce. We need all that talent, and it is perfectly possible for us to get to a place like every other country on Earth, except Lesotho and Papua New Guinea, to have paid maternity leave, but we can leapfrog all those other countries and go straight to paid parental leave. And indeed, I would go even further and go to paid family leave, where everyone, you can take it for your children, you can take it for your parents, but this makes economic sense. And the last thing I want to say about this, and why I'm happy to be up here talking about parental leave, is we need to provide this for fathers every bit as much as for mothers, for several reasons. One, men have to be seen and expected to be caregivers just as much as women have to be seen and expected to be breadwinners. That's what true equality is. It's not women do breadwinning and caregiving and men do breadwinning. It's both do both. Imagine if every couple, if you have two-parent couple, both members of that couple could work 75% time, or both members of that couple could divide their leave so that for those first 6 months, or maybe even up to a year, you would have parents more at home. They can work from home, they can ease back into the workforce. It is totally doable. We simply need to decide that it's important enough to do. But let me end on some good news, and let me just say, second, on the point about men, this isn't just for women. Men deserve to have that same opportunity to bond with their children, to have their children need them, to discover what it is. I mean, you don't get any sleep, but boy, do you get a lot of emotional satisfaction. Right? My husband wanted a different relationship with his children than he had with his father. I know a lot of young men who would like to have the same relationship with their children that their mother did or their spouse does. Why shouldn't all human beings want that wonderful combination of work that allows you to fulfill your individual goals and desires, and that wonderful sense of being needed and in being important in your life with your children, those you love? So this is for men as much as it is for women, and it's for equality. That last bit of good news. For the first time ever in my lifetime, we are having an election where family leave and parental leave is actually on the table. I say in my lifetime, but actually in 1971, Richard Nixon signed a bipartisan bill that passed both houses of Congress with large majorities for universal daycare. Richard Nixon vetoed it. Since then, it has not been an issue, but this election, not just from the Democrats, not just Bernie Sanders and Secretary Clinton, but also Marco Rubio and Donald Trump. For the first time, this is becoming an issue, and it's not a women's issue. It's a human issue, it's an economic issue, it's a security issue, and it is an American issue of promising equality between men and women and equal opportunity for all of our children. Thank you very much. And we now turn to a video from Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Thank you.
Hi, I'm U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and I want to welcome all of you to this important conversation about one of my top priorities in the Senate, paid family and medical leave. Every business in America has employees, from engineers to cashiers to custodial workers, who will have medical emergencies in their lives that will require them to take time off. These life events can create a serious financial burden for employees who have to take time off without pay, but they can also create a serious financial burden for businesses. When a female employee has to take care of her aging parents but has no paid leave and has to quit, her business will have to hire and train a replacement worker. That's expensive. When a male employee is sitting at his desk while his wife is in the hospital and he's stuck in the office because he doesn't have paid leave, that's lower morale. It's lower productivity, it's lower efficiency. We are the only industrialized country in the world that still doesn't guarantee its workers some form of paid leave. And we are taking a financial and economic hit for it. It's an artificial drag on our economy. Right now, American men who leave the labor force because they don't have paid leave lose $284,000 in lifetime wages and Social Security benefits. And women lose even more. They lose $324,000 over their lifetimes. That's less spending power, it's less investment. We need to see paid leave as a smart and pragmatic business decision. It's an insurance policy that boosts productivity, improves morale, and increases loyalty. So I urge all of you to continue raising your voices about this important issue, and I wish everyone here a productive and informative conversation.
I just want to thank Seleni and Concordia for convening this summit. I am thrilled to be here. This is truly one of my passions, and I imagine it is a passion of many, a passion for many of you as well in the audience. I'm going to do very brief introductions of our panel. Incredibly impressive people here. They deserve longer introductions, but in the interest of time and getting to this conversation, we'll go pretty quickly. First, right here, we have the Honorable Kathleen Rice. She's representing New York's 4th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. Sitting right next to her is Jeff Glueck, Chief Executive Officer of Foursquare. Also joining us, Laura Fuentes, Senior Vice President of Talent, Rewards, and People Analytics for Hilton Worldwide, and Heather Jassy. She is Senior Vice President of Values Aligned Business for Etsy. A round of applause for our panel. So I wanted to start right where Dr. Slaughter was leaving off, which is where we are in this national conversation. For the first time, in a presidential campaign, the issue of paid leave, front and center, not off to the side. You have the Democratic and Republican nominees talking about the issue. You have 3 out of 4 Americans in polls saying they want action on paid leave. So, Congresswoman, I come to you first. It seems, depending on who becomes the next president, both of them say they want paid leave. What is it going to take to get action through the Congress and have a paid leave law in this country?
Well, if I could answer that question, I would be the $50 billion person. You know, I'm going to overstate the obvious. There isn't a lot going on in Washington right now, just because when you get in the heat of a political presidential campaign, everything is focused on that. But I'm, as you know, you say, Kelly, I'm incredibly encouraged that this is an issue that's being spoken about, because it's very difficult for people to talk about two candidates to talk about what they want to get done and then drop, although it has happened. But in an issue like this, where there's such public support for this, I don't see how it gets walked back. The big obstacle is the hyper-partisan situation that we have in Washington. My hope is that after this presidential election, the fact that we have had this kind of presidential election in our lifetime will be a wake-up call to me and my colleagues to actually put aside all of our ideological intransigence and actually try to get something done. Now, individually, as a member of Congress, I can set my own policy, and I allow 16 weeks of paid leave for people in my office, and we have small offices, and it doesn't come without a sacrifice. But I can tell you that two individuals in my office, just in the short time that I have been there since 2015, have taken advantage of that, and it has made the office a much better, more efficient, more congenial, more positive atmosphere. So I'm going to do everything in my part, but it really is getting people to put aside the partisan politics and get down to work.
Yeah, and we have seen corporate America, we have seen businesses really taking the lead. Jeff, maybe you want to pick up here and we can start off, but we are seeing amazing policies going into effect at businesses across the country. Why is that happening, and what message should that be saying to policymakers in Washington?
Well, as the Congresswoman said, I think there's a heightened awareness and desire on the part of workers as well as the voting public for paid leave. It's the right thing to do. It's good business. So Google and other tech companies have been changing their policy. At Foursquare, my company, and we're about 200 employees based in California and New York, we moved to 12 weeks this year for primary caregivers and 8 weeks as well for secondary caregivers. And that was intentionally designed not just for maternity leave and paternity leave, but also adopting couples and for same-sex couples and all kinds of new family arrangements to support that. And it's the right thing to do. It's also competitive. So what you're seeing is, although I'm hopeful Capitol Hill will take action, there is a lot of gridlock. But what starts to happen in the private sector is we all compete for talent. And so, the goal here is to unlock talent for top companies. We need that talent. And so it becomes an expectation for elite talent that you will offer, 8 to 12 weeks minimum, or you won't be able to attract the top programmers and professionals. That said, we'll come back to it, although 70% of companies are offering some kind of, family medical leave or maternity leave. For independent workers, that's only 20%. And I think that's a topic we probably will come back to over the course of this conversation.
Yeah, we want to pick up on that for sure. Laura, I want to bring you in. I mean, you all at Hilton taking the lead in the hospitality industry when it comes to paid leave. Is it a talent? Is that part of the equation to get the best people and keep them there? This investment in personnel, this is part of it? Is it done because for good business? Is it done because it's
absolutely.
The right thing to do?
So I would echo the comments that Jeff just made. So it's both for talent and a values issue for us, right? So we survey our team members every year. We ask over 150,000 team members to tell us what matters to them. And more, this issue of flexibility, support for the key events of their lives matters tremendously. So obviously for us to want to attract and retain the very best talent, we have to deliver on what matters to them. But it's also a vision and a values play for us, right? The first value of Hilton is hospitality. And so it felt incredibly important to us to not only live that as words on a wall or words on a paper, but to actually bring it to life. So we have just launched in 2016 our new parental leave program, which offers 10 weeks of fully paid leave for all mothers, both at our hotels, right? And so this is where we really kind of set a new standard, I believe, for service workers in the hospitality industry, because this is the population that most folks either exclude from very generous pay practices or just haven't scaled yet at that level. So in the US, all of the hotel workers, front desk, restaurant F&B service, housekeeping department get 10 weeks of full paid, all birth mothers, and all parents will have 2 weeks. We've also just implemented and will launch a $10,000 adoption assistance plan. And we're looking at a broader ecosystem of support for our talent. So things that we heard in the introduction around advance notice for scheduling. Most hourly workers get 1 to 2 days. We've instituted a 10-day minimum. a GED assistance program where we help and pay for expenses related to getting your high school diploma. PTO, we offer a minimum of 18 days, both at corporate and our hotel. So we're really trying to create a system where our employees and team members can join us, thrive, take care of their families, and then it is increased productivity, increased morale, increased engagement, and retention.
Heather, is it values and talent? I know Etsy has a 26, you heard that right, 26 weeks fully paid leave policy. Is that right?
And I'll add just a little bit to that. So this went into effect on April 1st, and it's 26 weeks with 8 weeks used continuously in the first 6 months. And it is a gender-blind policy, so this applies to men in the company as well. And so I'd say yes on talent and yes on values, certainly. It's in my title. I've got a great title. But I think the other piece of it for us is about diversity in our workforce. I won't go into all of it here, but there's a tremendous amount of research on the fact that there's a much higher correlation of female board membership in companies where men also take paternity leave, because as long as women are seen as the only primary caregivers and all of that care is associated with women and they're the only ones stepping away, it's hard for us to get to a place of gender equality, and really the kind of diverse workforce that we really believe in having will enrich our company and the work that we do.
You know, Congressman, I want to bring you in because it's amazing, right, what these companies are doing and other companies around the country are doing it. That said, we still know that not every worker will benefit from these policies. Under the Family Medical Leave Act, as you may know, you get 12 weeks of unpaid leave, but something like 40% of workers are not benefiting from that coverage for a number of reasons, including they may work for companies that are under 50 employees. So, Congresswoman, it shows you that unless we get a real policy, in some national way, it's amazing what's going on at companies, and we want that to continue, but we still might have workers left out, won't we, if we don't get a full federal mandate?
So I applaud all of our private sector companies who are actually, I'm embarrassed to say, leading the way on this issue. Look, I'm one of 10 kids. I bet my mother wished there was a family leave policy in our family.
I bet
she didn't have one, that's for sure. We're living in different times now. Women are more than half the head of households in families. I spent 9 years before I went to Congress as a DA out in Nassau County. And I can tell you that there is so much emphasis placed on the critical years of development in a child, being from birth to 5. And if children present in nursery school or kindergarten and they haven't hit any of the critical milestones, tying their shoes, holding a pencil, writing their name, beginning to read, they can never catch up. That's not just an individual problem for that child or an issue for that family. That is a community and a national issue for us as a country. And Congress should be leading the way on this. People should not be left behind. We have to place, it really is a value issue. What kind of values do we as a country want to say matter? The days of saying, you have to choose are over. I've never heard a man in politics who has a family at home asked, how are you balancing it? How are you able to be an effective father and be here in Washington when your family is back? And yet women are asked that still all the time. So until we get over those kind of roadblocks that are in our way and focus on the development of our children as a country, we're going to be behind the 8 ball.
Jennifer Garner got a lot of laughs. I think she was at an event with a lot of women. She said, every interview I do for every movie, I get, how are you balancing your work and family at the movie? Does Ben Affleck ever get that question? She said, someday he might, but not. But that does bring us to the role of fathers and why paternity leave, paid paternity leave, is so important. But also, Jeff, I want to bring you in. It's also important, I believe, to have it, but it's also so important for men at the highest level using it and taking it. I think when we saw Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook taking his 2-month paid paternity leave, that's a big message. Why is it so important, A, for men to get it and also for men to use it?
Well, the study that Heather alluded to, I would call out, which is that if you look at, if the goal is a world where women have the same professional opportunities and society takes advantage of all the talent among professional women in a way we have not figured out as a society, then you need to figure out maternity leave, paternity leave, illness leave, all of these things, because families need that to be able to balance careers and the like. And the correlation specifically was that in countries where there's more women in senior executive and board positions, there was 11 times more paternity leave taken, paid paternity leave. So what's the connection, right? It's setting that precedent of it's okay, you can rise in your career and still take the time with a newborn or an ill child or an ill parent, I would add, and still rise in your career, and that's okay. And it's important for men to take that as a symbolic thing because, historically women were discriminated against for some of those roles because they were balancing things, and that's wrong from a talent perspective, and it's not the future. So we deliberately, when we set our policy, thought a lot about including both same-sex couples, adoption couples, but also the fathers into that leave, and it's encouraged and welcome. And we're like many tech companies, and I think tech industry is at the forefront of a lot of this stuff because the millennial generation that makes up a lot of our workers has different expectations about how work and private life are balanced. And so they're demanding this, and I think the political scene isn't caught up with that yet. But I think there's a lot more consciousness about how work is important and it's critical and we're doing great work, but we also need lives. And so I think the millennial generation and therefore the tech generation are really driving a lot of this conversation. And so father's leave is, I think, a critical piece of that and taking it. And what Mark Zuckerberg did, you're right, was very symbolic. Yeah.
I mean, the millennials, I sort of say they are single-handedly changing the way we work. I mean, and companies are trying now to catch up, I think, in some ways, because they are, as you said, not just expecting, but they're demanding much more work-life balance in terms of the way they work. Heather, Laura, do you want to come in terms of how you crafted your policy and the importance of paid paternity leave for your workers?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I'll comment on the millennials as well as one of our favorite HR topics. So yeah, on the paternity side, I mean, for us, it was important to offer flexibility and optionality, and we do believe, per the points we made earlier, that it is around diversity as well and inclusion, and allowing all of our team members to be who they want to be, supporting them at this critical milestone, and offering the women and men an option to be there for the families and return when they're ready to do so. And obviously, if you think of the broader ecosystem of families, women need to be able to return and have a support system, right? We just heard in the opening remarks to the Monicas of the world. I mean, I'd like to offer an option where it isn't this gut-wrenching choice of where do you leave your child, but that you have another parent that can actually make that support contribution as well. On the millennials, it's interesting. At Hilton, like I mentioned, we survey our team members every year, and we found we have almost 50% of our population is millennial as well, both at hotels and in our corporate offices. And when we segment the data, we actually found that a lot of their feedback is similar to other generations, right? They want similar things. They want to work for a mission-driven company. They want growth in their careers. They want great benefits. But the millennials are louder, right? So when we look at the comments and the ability to write in a written comment, 90% of our comments are from millennials. So the other generations are kind of like, yeah, I'll answer the survey real quick. Millennials are leaning in and giving us more insight, giving us better examples, and that's really what helped us carve some of these policies. And I think that expectation, they're going to be a larger and larger share of the workforce. So we really want to be able to work together, frankly, with our team members in crafting that value proposition.
Heather, are you seeing that same impact from millennials?
Absolutely. I feel very old every day.
I know.
At 41. So I think that when we started this policy, I think our policy prior to April 1st was 5 weeks for secondary caregiver, 12 weeks for primary. And under that policy, our CEO took his full paternity leave when he adopted a son, and it set a great example in the company because I think, to someone's point, if we have it but the leaders don't do it, it makes it uncomfortable for other people to do the same. So we have to really believe it and live in it. But we really, started with the research, and we also thought about not just understanding what we need to do to create this very diverse workplace, but also thinking longer term, how do we make employees happy? How do we make them feel engaged? How are we not investing in them just on a quarterly basis, but over the long term? And so that's where we started with this research. But we also put other things into place as part of this to help ensure that it would be more successful. So some of the things we've done are, create great mommy rooms for when people come back to work and need to pump. We invested in coaching for parents right before they leave and right when they come back to help them ease that transition in and out. We also do training for managers on how to support employees in the right way. And then I think, it's a much broader thing that we have to do, which is teach people how to plan for months, how to delegate their work, how to share. And one thing that's important to note is because there is flexibility in the way that this is crafted, people don't just drop out for 6 months. They've done all kinds of interesting configurations. So I've seen people take 4 months off and then ease back in, 2 days a week and then 3 days a week over a longer period of time. And I've just been incredibly encouraged by how people are planning really well, and they're also, sharing the load and working together really well with making this happen for others. And it's created, I think it's fostered a really, really positive morale situation.
Can I just jump in
Absolutely.
for a second? We're hearing from 3 private companies who are actually making it work and are still profitable.
Right.
And so my colleagues need to be hearing this
Yes.
because we can have these arguments in Washington all day long about, is this the right policy? And then it's versus how are we going to pay for it, right? So what we need to get people in Washington to see is that this is the right policy. As a country, we should be encouraging this. We should be looking to our partners in the private sector, watching how they do it, and they're still profitable, and they are encouraging this kind of behavior, and they're actually, beating us by leaps and bounds. And then there's always the question of how you pay for it. And, that can be subject to debate. But my argument to my colleagues when we talk about this is we can't afford not to do this because you have to take the long view, not the short view. If we, look, one of the big issues is how you're going to pay for anything in Washington. But it's important that the private sector and individuals, right, whether you're in the millennial generation or you're a parent of a millennial, and that is your motivation for being so passionate about this issue, we need these voices to be heard in Washington because very often we just sit in the Capitol like it's a little bubble and we have these conversations that are just very circular and don't really go anywhere. So
no, that's
very helpful.
It's a key point because we want people to leave this room with sort of a takeaway, right? Actions they can take in terms of getting involved in this issue, engaging, trying to bring about the change they believe in. What do you guys think in terms of a public-private partnership, advice to people in the room about what they can do to try and get the policies put forward that they so believe in?
Well, one other group that I'm sure we're all happy to come to Washington and speak to anybody if we can be
bring them
helpful
there.
with that. But I think the other group that we're particularly concerned with at Etsy is people who are business owners who fall outside of that traditional employee-employer relationship. We have 1.7 million sellers. Almost 90% of those are women. And, we're thinking about portable benefits packages and things that would be of assistance to those workers as well so that they could also step away, because we feel like that and we've been advocating for policy in Washington on that, but that there's a tremendous opportunity to really, create a culture of innovation in our country by providing those sorts of safety nets for those workers as well.
I wanted to absolutely 100% echo what Heather just said. It was just, if you look at what Washington is discussing, and it's a wonderful thing that both presidential candidates finally, for the first time in memory, are talking about issues of maternal and paternity leave. But more and more workers fall into this gray zone where they are Etsy sellers or they're Airbnb hosts or they're Uber drivers or Lyft or they're Upwork contractors. And women around the world are more likely to fall into these independent worker jobs because they often offer flexibility, right? And both men and women deserve the optionality to have a more flexible work-life balance. But there are it's not just paid leave, it's unemployment insurance, right? It's health benefits, it's non-discrimination, it's right to organize, it's all of these worker protections. And so, Andrew McAfee at MIT has been writing about this independent worker designation, which isn't getting discussed in the presidential race. It's something between a contractor and a full-time employee. And what we don't want to do is we're not Sweden or Norway, and so you don't want to create policies that just deter full-time employment. But you want to think about this continuum. So it is about paternity and maternity leave and all of these other things. Why don't we have some kind of unemployment or disability or retirement savings? And Care.com, for instance, recently announced something where everyone who hires a home care worker or a child care worker will contribute a few cents extra per hour to retirement benefits and health benefits and other things, and that they're portable. But there's just such a need. There's over 500,000 Uber drivers and 1.7 million Etsy sellers.
Yeah,
We're just beginning.
that's a great point. Laura?
And I'd add to that, so we, when we were first studying putting this in place, we ran the numbers and we did the analytics behind our survey, and we asked our team members. And so we looked at it from an analytical perspective, from a strategic perspective, but at the end of the day, I would say for all of the companies out there that might be contemplating this or thinking through it, and as we launched, we got a lot of our peers and competitors and other folks in the service industry ask us, well, how could you do it? How can you afford this? And at the end of the day, and it sounds a little bit Pollyannish, but we led with our values. And so you can ask your CEO if she or he believes that you can return to work after giving birth or after adopting a child. Is that the kind of company that you want to work for? Do you think your workers will continue to join you as more and more companies do what we're doing, right? And so it does become a talent play, but more and more also you can appeal to that higher vision, I believe. And I think other companies will start to follow that as more of us make the leap. And we are still in business, and we're doing very well. And we've had over 500 people either currently on our leave policies or have already taken it. And so, it doesn't break the bank. It doesn't drive you into bankruptcy. And in fact, I hope that over time, we'll also be able to demonstrate that retention and engagement play. As far as the partnership on the public and private sector side, I think there's a way potentially to augment the spotlight on some of these issues, similar to, so Hilton just joined the White House pledge on equal pay. And so there is an opportunity to put out these issues that are of critical importance and have companies, sign up where they believe are already making the effort to advance the issues.
And Congresswoman, I wonder, we're seeing it already happening in states. New York, many of you know, one of the most comprehensive or most generous paid leave policies became law. It will go into effect in a couple of years, following what? Rhode Island, New Jersey, and California. So now we'll have 4 states offering paid leave. San Francisco earlier this year, the first city in the country to offer, I believe, 6 weeks of fully paid leave. Is that possibly going to be the way that we're going to see this at a city and state level, more and more cities and states, before maybe we get to a federal policy?
If you look just from a historical perspective, that's how change is usually brought, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, New York was one of the leaders in terms of full equality for LGBT, and then before you knew it, there we are on the federal level. So that's why I do my best to encourage people to be as vocal as possible, because even though you think people in Washington are deaf, we hear it, trust me. We get the phone calls. When we go back to our districts, we hear people say, what are you doing about this? Why isn't the government addressing this issue? And, you can do the back and forth, and you go to Washington, and you are in a little bit of this bubble. But the more that, and look, we live here in New York in a very progressive state. Just look at the things that our governor and the mayor of New York are doing in this space alone, and how they've been leaders in the past on other issues. So I think that this is usually the way things happen. It's unfortunate that it has to take action like this, but it's better than change not happening at all. And change is difficult. I mean, when I think about how I was growing up, I used to go into classrooms and say to kids, how many of you have cell phones? And every hand would go up. And then I'd say to them, when I was growing up, there was one phone in the house.
And it was attached to the
wall. And you could only walk a certain distance away from it.
They can't even understand that.
They look like I'm some kind of an alien. So agitating for change is effective and can actually bring about change.
Yeah, we're down to our last 3 minutes or so. I can't even believe it. So maybe final words for each of you. Jeff, why don't I begin with you? You got an audience of activists in this room. People want change. What can people walk away from here doing to try and make this something that more people benefit from.
I'd echo what you've heard all day long, which is, smart, thriving businesses are finding ways to make this work. And it doesn't have to be rigid. It can be over a year, as Heather mentioned, that some of these leave policies go out, which helps, both the worker have flexibility and the business necessarily not have a worker out, let's say 4 months straight all the time. So this is a values issue, but it's also a practical issue about unlocking all the talent that we need to bring, not just into the tech sector, but into the workforce as the society changes and traditional forms of employment, and particularly in New York State, like the financial sector come down, tech and the new sort of gig economy are going to be providing employment in the future, and thinking through how that work-life balance of the future works is key to our society, our kids. I'm a dad of 3, and so this matters a lot to me, and a lot of my closest friends are super professional women who struggle with this every day, and society's not set up to bring this talent in. And so I'm proud that our company is part of this movement to move the ball forward about how the world should be.
And Laura, also to the people who might be afraid to have that conversation with their female or male CEO about values, what would you tell them?
I would say to have the courage to stand up for what you believe in and challenge what may seem impossible. So, you can do it for 60,000 hourly team members. You can do it at scale. You can be the change you want to see out there. As a working mom, this was incredibly important to me, and I'm really proud to be a part of a company that supports the issue. And I won't work for one that won't. And I think you're going to see more and more of that. So I would say be brave, be bold, and go for it.
Heather?
That's good. Yes, also a parent, and I love what you both said. I'd say that to be the bigger issue beyond thinking about this as parental leave is getting past the notion that business can't be successful and be good and care about employees. And I feel like a lot of this comes down to short-termism in thinking. Do we think about the next quarter or the next, or, how much we're going to grind out of our employees over the next 3 months, or do we think about investing in people over the very long term? And so I think that this is about changing the conversation that's happening in business to something that's much longer term and creating something that's of benefit for all of us.
And Congresswoman Rice?
All right, so here's my pitch. Run for office.
Yes.
At a local level, state level, federal level. There isn't enough diversity in Washington, I can tell you that. And the reason why we get stuck in these policy discussions is because a lot of people there have never had the experiences that my panel mates up here have had. And so they come at these policy discussions from a very different perspective. I'm not saying that you have to be one of the problems in the world right now, at least in this country, I should say, not in the world, but in this country, is that being a politician has become a profession as opposed to a vocation, right? Where you say, I'm going to do it for 6 years, I'm going to do it for 8 years, and then I'm going to go back into the private sector. I'm going to serve my country in this way that I can. And being a politician has gotten a really bad name, but we need more diversity. And so it's one thing to agitate and being vocal and be out there, but think about throwing your hat in the ring.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's keep this conversation going. Such an important one. Today and tomorrow, use hashtag Concordia16. You'll find our Twitter handles, very easy to find. Please keep the conversation going. I'm at CNN, and I love doing stories on this topic. Thank you all so much for being here today. Congresswoman Rice, Jeff Glueck, Laura Fuentes, Heather Jassy, thank you all for being here.